How do you not fall into the trap of anxiety and fear and stress during the season where every day when you look at the news, it gets bleaker and things are really changing dramatically and it's changing fast and we don't know where the end in sight. And so I think it's important for us to really pause and say, what is the opportunity during the season? Because we really can't control right now what's happening in the world. The only thing we can control is our perspective. And we can either go into a spiral of fear, stress, and anxiety, which is a legitimate time to actually feel those fear because the world is really a pause. I mean, when was it where the whole world literally took a tumble and pause? And so we are in a very new time. Now, it's also important to remember that in times where there's a shift, there's a change, there is a new norm, a new anxiety, there is a natural state of anxiety that happens. However, what we have a choice to either stay in that anxious state, which is really dangerous, and I'm going to talk to you about that, or make that an opportunity to take action towards giving birth to a new woman. And that's what I want to talk about today. So I want to share with you my screen. My name is January Donovan. I am founder of the Women's School, where we really emphasize on the strength and resilience of our mindset and rebuilding skill set based on the integrated woman so that we can become and give birth to the new woman that is going to lead the next generation and rebuild our culture. And that's really our mission and vision here in the Women's School. So today I'm just going to get really practical on some of the tools that I believe are non-negotiable during the season and time. And so during the season. And so I think that we have a brilliant opportunity right now, like no other time in history. And so we have to take advantage of it and not fall into the trap of being fearful and stressful. And if you're a mom, use this training because I'm going to give you a real script. If you're a single woman, you can basically rephrase it. And I'm going to show you and give you reason why we really need to take advantage of this time. So first of all, our life is, we shape our life with our thoughts and our words. And therefore we can reshape it during the season. It's so important for us to understand that, what we think about becomes our perspective. If we think, oh my gosh, this is horrible, everything is going to be horrible. Or we say, I'm just so grateful that now I'm healthy. That changes the way we live our day. So it's important to note that our thoughts compounding with our words basically becomes our perspective. Who you are right now is shaped by your habitual thought patterns. So if it's fear, if anxiety, if it's stress, it's overwhelm, whatever it is that you're experiencing right now, it's because the thought patterns was there and the words that we're using creates our perspective. Okay. So here is a concept that I want you mothers, women to understand. And it's so important for us in this season to actually give us a good reason to make sure we don't fall into the trap of negativity. So here, just look at my cursor, thoughts. So if I'm, constantly looking at the news and my thoughts are all negative, it releases an emotion. It could be anxiety, it could be stress. Now that emotion releases a chemical in our body that actually either tenses our body, releases the cortisol, which is stress hormones, or dopamine. So the way it works is that if I'm thinking grateful thoughts, if I wake up in the morning and I'm thinking, I'm so grateful that now I'm healthy, that changes my emotion. It puts me in a state of peace and ease, right? The chemical reaction there that happens is that my body is in a state of peace, right? I'm not tense. Now let's put that in the opposite. If I'm constantly looking in the news and, there's legitimate reason to worry and be cautious. And so if I'm constantly, oh my gosh, what happened? There's no food, there's no toilet paper. I'm going to homeschool my kids, and we just go into this rat race of negative thoughts. And then we find ourselves in anxiety, right? And then we, without even knowing it, our body starts to tense up. Our back starts to hurt, we get a migraine, and it affects every part of our body, and there's no peace. Now, remember, as women, we now have a brilliant opportunity to become hope, become a woman of joy, become a woman of peace amidst this craziness. And if our thought pattern, if our habitual pattern has been negative, we can shift it. And that's my invitation here for you, is that it's now really a time to pay attention to how we have responded in the past to the external circumstances around us. because we cannot control the external circumstance. And now is the most perfect time for us to even reflect on that. I can't control what's happening in the world, how many people are going to get, going to get sick. I can only control my thoughts, my health, my family life. And so we need to make sure that we are controlling what we can control, which is what we think about and the words we're using. So right now we are in a state of discomfort. And what I mean by that is there's a shift in the world. Every time there's a change, every time we have to go through the unknown, there is discomfort. Why? Because we don't know what's going on. It's out of our comfort zone. We don't know. It's like moving to a different state. There's new people, new roads, new territory, new map, new everything, right? So there's a discomfort. So in times of change, we could either fall into the trap of worry and anxiety, or we could give rise to a new woman who's saying, okay, now it's different. How do I approach the unknown? Right? Discomfort should give rise to a new you by consciously rewiring old neurons through repetition. So I'm going to talk to you here about neurons because it's important. This will give you and help you understand what's happening. So in our brain, the way we respond to things such as negativity, doubt, fear, that actually it becomes a physical wiring in our brain. Like this is a wire, okay? So if you look to the right here, we are born with 100 billion neurons, and those get wired and fired together. And through the process of repetition, they become a hardwiring. So for example, we learn language by hardwiring. When we were first born, we didn't know that this was a cup, right? We learn it through the process of repetition. Now, the same thing with worry, with fear, with anxiety. We must have inherited it somewhere. We had no capacity to actually replace it. So we might have just habitually learned how to worry and stress, and it becomes a hardwire that even though we don't want to worry, we worry, right? Like if I tell you this was a banana, you're going to think, Jen, you're crazy. That's a cup. Why? Because you've known it to be a cup for decades. It's the same thing without, you got to stop worrying. If I tell you that, you're going to be like, okay, that's great. But really, I just have always worried all my life. I've always been anxious all my life. I've always been stressed, because that is a habitual thought pattern. Now, in this season, if we continue in that pattern, we are going to get pummeled because the anxiety is higher. Right. And so how do we operate, homeschool our children, be present in our relationship, because we can't do anything right now to control external circumstances, except that we can only control our current perspective. Right. I mean, the craziness of how many people are going to get infected in what country, in what town, all that is beyond us. So I want to introduce you to this, law called neuroplasticity, which we're rewiring old thought patterns and replacing them with the new thought patterns that is in alignment with the woman that we're choosing to be. And hopefully that woman is a woman of hope, a woman of joy, a woman of peace, so that now we can give birth to a new woman and not continue the negative thought pattern that perhaps we were awakened to, or that we didn't even know we were in. So if you look at here, neuroplasticity is taking an old wiring and basically cutting it off through a process of atrophy. Basically, if you don't use, you basically replace a wiring and connecting a new wiring. So let's just say you've always gone into worry. Every time something happens, you're like, oh my gosh, worst case scenario. We're going to replace that wiring. And through a process of repetition, I'm going to show you, what if you were the best case scenario woman? What if instead of complaining, you were a really grateful woman, right? So right here to the left, if you look at the slides, it's actually what you focus on lights up and creates new wirings. So, it's like learning a language. At first, when you maybe learned French, you're like, oh, this is so confusing. But through the process of repetition, you learn French, because those actually, through the process of repetition, they start to light up and they form neural networks. Why am I going to length explain these to you? Because it's a scientific process. Because what happens is I'm going to give you a reason to not worry, because what happens when our body is stressed is that it affects every part of our body physically. Remember, thoughts affect our emotions, is a chemical reaction that changes our body. That's when we realize, oh, I'm so susceptible to colds. Or, all of a sudden I have migraine, cause of stress. And our thyroid is affected, our metabolism, asthma, stomach pain, digestive issues are caused by stress. Our back pain, I can tell when I'm tense because it actually goes to my back, and every woman's different. And so many of our thoughts, now that they are seeing it affect our body, and they can now see it under a microscope. And, when you see women or men who suffer maybe psoriasis or eczema, it actually gets worse when we're stressed. And so it's important that we actually regulate so we don't give rise to all this physical pain, and makes us susceptible and lowers our immune system, because we haven't controlled and managed our thoughts and our words. Okay. Now to the right, you'll see this reticular activator system. It's a part in our brain that God designed that helps us to filter and prioritize information. So what we focus on actually expands. So whatever it is that if I'm focusing in all the negativity, that's exactly what I'm going to see more of. If I'm pregnant, all of a sudden I start to see all the pregnant women. If I'm looking for a white car, I start to see all the white car. That's how reticular activator works. So our reticular activator, our, RAS system, let's use that for our benefit. So now let's focus on the good, the hope, the positive, and replace that old woman who maybe have gone into worry, doubt, and stress. And now let's actually replace our focus by using a reticular activator so that we don't give our lower immune system and now make ourselves susceptible to being constantly worried. Now we have to homeschool children while getting worried. I mean, it's just a lot of burden on us, specifically right now as women, because of why the world changed. So we have an opportunity to shift that old version of ourselves and really say, enough is enough. I am going to shift my perspective so I don't give myself, cause myself to be even more burdened in a place that's already burdensome, right? So how do we do this? Number one, we have to replace our words. Okay. Step through, we have to rewire through repetition. So I'm going to talk about that. So with the words we use, we're not going to replace it. If I'm saying, I'm so overwhelmed, I'm so stressed, like there's words in the women's school that are illegal. We don't use it. Why? Because it shapes and frames our perspective. So instead of saying, oh, this is so stressful, we say it's a bit of a dance party. What we're saying is that we're diffusing its magnitude because we can't change that, and we're shifting our perspective. So we have words that we were going to use, and I'm going to tell you what words that you can use right now that will really help you shift perspective. Now, these are scripts in the women's school, but you can use it however way you want to use it and replace it and add and subtract. In the women's school, we have hundreds of scripts that we use, whether it's worry, whether it's stress, whether it's new relationship. And this is just me giving you real practical, concrete words to use. So, okay, we're all quarantined with a negative tonality. Okay, words are 7%, 38% is tonality, and 55% is body language. So that's important that we actually are hyper aware of all those different things that shapes our thoughts, our body. We are all connected, ladies, and we need to understand ourselves better so that we can actually have more command of ourselves. And that way we actually have more command of our results, because our thoughts determine so much of our result. If I'm constantly worried, guess who's actually receiving that? My children. Now they're stressed, now they're anxious. It affects every part of our life. If I'm peaceful, guess what? Everyone around me, actually gets drawn to that peace. So it changes our perspective. When we're stressed, we can't actually think logically. Okay, so now is the time to be very practical, logical, and replace those negative patterns. So, okay, we're all quarantined. Two, shifted perspective. We have an opportunity to bond as a family. I now have to homeschool. Time to skill up my time management and boundary skills. How do I entertain my children? It's important for my children to entertain themselves. We're not here to entertain our children. And if we do, we rob them of the reality of how the world's going to work, because the world's not going to entertain them. They need to actually learn to busy themselves and learn to focus on their own. And the world is not going to entertain them. So now is the time to shift that. If that was the way you approached what your home life is like. How am I going to do it all? It's time to raise our standards and ask help from everyone. Our children need help. They need to be doing laundry. They need to be helping us fold. And it's not going to look perfectly beautiful, but it's going to help them and train them to actually be more competent human being and help during the season. How do I not lose my mind? I need to learn to manage my mind more than ever. So now you're saying, oh, I'm just going to learn mind management skill. There's nothing to do, or there's no better time to replace doing with being. We have been living a rat race of doing, and it's costing us our health. We know that from burnout. We know that because we're pulled from every direction. Now we are forced to stop, focus on being and being present in the moment as a skill set in itself. We go deep into us in the women's school. I'm just giving you scripts here to replace. Everyone is getting bored. Boredom is a great time for reflection. Boredom is where we invent things. Right? So it's a really important time, and it's not boredom and just sort of like, it's going into the video games and going into, Netflix and binging. It's boredom where we're actually time to process and think and just be present in our thoughts in the quiet. And sometimes it scares us because we've never been taught how to do that. But now is a time to actually begin to just say, okay, I'm just going to be present with my thoughts, right? It's a great time for reflection. There's a lot more bickering. For example, at the house, sometimes if you're homeschooling, there's a lot more bickering, or if you're in a relationship because you're more in the, closed space. Oh, this is a good time to practice connection skills. Everything is going out of control. I can only control my thoughts, my health, and my attitude. This is so hard, Adversity gives me an opportunity to raise my resilience. Oh, it's a bit of a dance today. Adversity gives me time to raise my resilience. You know, I feel so hopeless. No, I'm a woman of hope. I want to have answers. I am a woman of peace amidst unknown. What if? Or I look for the best case scenario. So really, these are real scripts that I want you ladies to pay attention to and have some kind of reshaping in your mindset. So now we're really neurologically rewiring. It's not just like, oh, I'm kind of sleeping too negative. It's a real hard wiring, which is I kind of give you a 30-second understanding on it and why it's so important for us to understand that it's through the process of repetition and the use of the right words that shape our habitual thought patterns. And so by rewiring it, here's our rewiring formula, taking that old thought pattern and replacing it with a new wiring. This is the woman's school rewire formula so that we can neurologically rewire a response. And step one, we have to write it. So I want you ladies to write this response and then you recite it over and over again. You recite it. In the woman's school, we actually use our phone. It dings and it helps us to remember what to say, because that's about repeating it, right? So write, recite, repeat. So we repeat it over and over and through writing and reciting so that we replace our response, because we can't erase unless we replace. And number 4 is when we retreat. And when we retreat is really basically we go outside of our norm and just really pause and ponder and reflect of what it would mean to be a woman who is more hopeful, who's more grateful, who's more positive, who's calm during the season. So we actually envision and use our imagination to actually think, what if I was more calm? What would my world look like? And that's a process that is so important and vital. And it's really learning to live in our vision and our hope and our imagination. So we then become the woman that we're choosing to be, because we become what you really think about. So the key thing here is awareness in order to break the habit of negative thinking, right? This is the time to rise, ladies. And this is why it's such a beautiful time for us to take a step back and think of who we're becoming, because maybe we're not becoming the woman we want to be. And now it's a time for an elevated version of ourselves. It's a season, an opportunity to give birth to a new woman. And I could not find, there was no better time right now to really sink or swim, because we could continually wire ourselves into this negative death pattern of negative thoughts and desperation and stress because there's a legitimate reason. Or now is a time for us to get into training and say, how can I not be this woman anymore? And in this circumstance, use as an opportunity and a privilege to give birth to a new woman. So that's my gentle challenge for you, ladies. I know that we got into a little bit of neuroscience, but use that neuroscience to give you the ammunition you need to really shift your neurological wiring and give birth to a new woman. Share this video. Let's really, truly help each other give birth to a new woman. And now is the time to collaborate. And now is the time to be able to share this mission and vision of giving birth to a new woman amidst this adversity. And with adversity comes such a great opportunity to become a better version of ourselves. Thank you, ladies. Share this video. I hope that served you. Remember, if you want to learn more about the Women's School, go to thewomenschool.org or januarydonovan.com. And for more information, email us at info@januarydonovan.com. And we have, training after training for you that can really serve you during the season. We have groups also of women that are collaborating and masterminding together using a program that helps us to really now prepare and train ourselves. So we have an incredible place right now as to become students of being a woman. So let us know, contact us, and we want to hear to help you, especially during the season. My name is January Donovan, founder of the Women's School. Thank you. It is a privilege to serve women.